Welcome, everyone. I see people still coming in. So let's just take a moment right now while everyone's getting settled to silence your cell phones, if you could. And just note the exits from the room, as we always do, to your right, to your left, and behind you. Okay, come on in. Welcome. For many years, the library has been proud to partner with the United Nations Committee of New Canaan. This year, the committee made the decision to consolidate its operations by endowing an annual United Nations series at New Canaan Library. We're honored to be selected as the stewards of their important mission to present topics of geopolitical interest that align with the broad objectives of the UN. For the launch of this series, there is, sadly, no shortage of subjects whose dire urgency could captivate our attention, perhaps even overwhelming many of us with feelings of despair and powerlessness. Tonight, some of what you see and hear will be difficult, but you will also see and hear that progress is possible. New Canaan local Mark DeWaele believes this to his core and has long committed himself to furthering children's health, well-being, and opportunity through numerous initiatives, including what you're going to learn about here, providing critical surgical care to some of the world's most vulnerable children. Fellow New Canaanite Eileen Thomas recently joined him in this work, and we're grateful to both of them for bringing us tonight's speaker, Maija Cheung. Dr. Cheung is a surgeon at Yale University and chief medical officer for Kids Operating Room. Before KidsOR, she spearheaded numerous projects for the Dartmouth Center for Healthcare Delivery Science, Yale Institute of Global Health, and as an ORISE Fellow at the National Institutes of Health, aimed at improving healthcare infrastructure, increasing training for health workers, and promoting access to care in underserved areas. Her work has taken her to remote villages, urban slums, and disaster-stricken regions where she has addressed healthcare disparities across diverse populations. With KidsOR, Dr. Cheung has helped build over 100 operating rooms in over 35 countries, training local surgeons and tailoring care to meet local needs, truly transforming the lives of millions of children and their families. That's not powerlessness, that's progress. Please help me welcome Dr. Maija Cheung.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that kind introduction. I am truly grateful to the library for having me here, to Ellen and Mickey for all of their help in making this happen. And I do also want to just recognize again two of our Kids Operating Room board members, Mark DeWaele and Eileen Sullivan Thomas. Mark has been our board chair and president since about March, and he was able to join me this summer in Botswana and Ethiopia and see our work firsthand. And his leadership, commitment, and ability to bring remarkable partners like Eileen on board really has been able to transform our growth this year, and I quite literally would not be standing on this stage without them. So please join me in a round of applause for them and the library as well. So I'm really honored to be a part of the UN lecture series. The United Nations, established in 1945 in the aftermath of World War II, it marked a powerful global commitment to prevent the kind of widespread conflict and devastation that the world had just endured. It was founded to maintain international peace and security through dialogue and collective action, to promote human rights by recognizing the dignity and equality of every person on the planet, and to foster social and economic development by reducing poverty and improving health and education. and ultimately to provide a platform for international cooperation so that nations could come together and solve challenges that no single country could solve on their own, from health and environment to humanitarian crises. Serving as the moral and practical backbone of our shared global efforts, the United Nations stands as a place where the challenges of humanity can be met with collective resolve. And in that vein, in 2015, the world came together around a shared plan, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. 17 commitments forming a universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure peace and prosperity for all. Each goal with clear and measurable targets, indicators that could provide a common framework for governments, organizations, and citizens to work together toward a fairer, more sustainable world by 2030. Admittedly, we're a little far behind, but the SDGs do continue to remind us that progress is interconnected. No single goal, as you'll see tonight, stands alone. Health, education, equality, and opportunity all reinforce one another. The spirit of unity lies at the center of the SDGs and at the heart of the work that I do. As a surgeon, my work is obviously centered a bit on Goal 3, good health and well-being, but I hope tonight what you'll see is how many of the other goals it connects with. When we talk about health, we often focus only on prevention and primary care, overlooking a vital piece of the puzzle, surgery. Surgery is not a luxury. It's a fundamental component of a functioning health system and a cornerstone of human dignity. Today, more than 5 billion people lack access to safe surgical care. For millions of children, that means preventable disability, loss of life, and lost potential. Strengthening surgical systems not only advances health and well-being, but gender equity, education, economic growth, and even climate resilience. So tonight I want to talk about a crisis that rarely makes headlines, the lack of access for safe surgery for children. It's a silent epidemic that intersects with nearly every SDG, health and well-being. It drives poverty, it limits education, and it weakens communities' abilities to adapt to environmental and economic change. That crisis is being driven by 3 powerful forces we all recognize: conflict, climate, and the rising burden of trauma and cancer worldwide. It's not a distant or invisible problem. It's a structural gap in our global health architecture, and one that we have both the means and the moral duty to close. The numbers are staggering. 30% of the global burden of disease is treatable with surgery, yet 87% of surgical need in low and middle income countries is unmet. This means that 1.75 billion children lack access to safe care. And this crisis is now being magnified by those global forces I mentioned. So remember, this isn't just a health crisis. It's a barrier to education, productivity, and prosperity worldwide. And the scale of the impact is staggering. Surgically treatable conditions kill over 4 times more people per year than HIV, TB, and malaria combined. Over 4 times. Yet 40% of the global health funding still goes to those infectious diseases, and only 2% is dedicated to non-communicable diseases, which includes surgery. This epidemic is also an economic issue. It's estimated that lack of access to surgery will cost low and middle income countries $12.3 trillion by 2030. That's up to 2% of the GDP lost every year only from untreated surgical conditions. A hernia or clubfoot can keep a child out of school, limit their future earning potential, and trap families in cycles of poverty. And when children make up such a large portion of the population, the consequences multiply. That top pyramid is for Uganda. Nearly half the population is under age 15. 77% of the population is under age 25. Compare this to the population pyramid of the US at the bottom. And what this means is that a high burden of surgical disease in children doesn't just devastate families. It undermines entire economies, and every barrier to care becomes a generational challenge. Stronger, healthier populations abroad make stronger economies, more stable trading partners, and ultimately fewer humanitarian crises that reach our shores. One of the biggest myths in global surgery is that it's too expensive. In reality, research over the last decade shows that surgical care is actually highly cost-effective. The World Health Organization lists essential procedures like C-sections, hernia repairs, treatment for birth defects, and trauma care as some of the most affordable life-saving interventions. With costs of just $6 to $33 per healthy year of life saved, that's on par with, and actually often cheaper than, vaccines or HIV treatment. If I told you that for the cost of one Starbucks latte, you could buy yourself a healthy year of life, I'm pretty sure we would all sign up for that plan. And we have shown that with the addition of even a single operating room in a country, we can increase that country's GDP by over $5 million in 1 year through lives saved and disability avoided in children. For the economists in the room, as a way of comparison, Apple retail stores are often touted as the most space-efficient economic investment. They generate approximately $5,000 of revenue per square foot. A KidsOR operating room generates over double that, $12,500 of investment per square foot in 1 year. So when people ask me, can we afford to invest in global surgery? My response is, the question is, can we afford not to? We often think of health challenges as local problems, but if the COVID-19 pandemic taught us anything, it's that health challenges are global. They cross borders, economies, and generations. So why are so many people still without access to safe surgery in 2025? When you trace it back, those three great pressures I mentioned earlier rise to the surface. Conflict that destroys systems, climate that reshapes them, and a growing burden of trauma and cancer that overwhelms them. The first of those forces, conflict, shows us just how fragile access to care can be. War doesn't just destroy buildings or borders, it dismantles entire health systems. It turns hospitals into battlegrounds and doctors into first responders for unimaginable trauma. In Ukraine, for example, attacks on the power grid have forced surgeons to operate by flashlight, as this photo from the AP reminds us. At St. Nicholas Children's Hospital in Lviv, the demand for pediatric surgery has tripled in the last 2 years as millions of displaced families have migrated west to get their children away from the front lines. Children like Stas. He's a 12-year-old boy who was injured when a rocket hit his bedroom. They rely on the extraordinary physicians there who are working in outdated and unsafe conditions. Obviously, Ukraine is not unique. In Syria, in Sudan, in Gaza, hospitals are not spared from conflict. Health systems collapse, and children pay the price. These photos were sent to me by a colleague of mine in Gaza who I've been working with on a project for the last 2 years. They show a little bit of what it means when healthcare itself becomes a casualty. Buildings scarred by bullets, wards emptied, and health workers risking everything to care for children amidst the devastation. I'm now going to share the perspective of one of my colleagues who's on the ground in Gaza, Alessandro Mrejcik, who's the head of office for the UN Development Program. He's going to speak briefly about why supporting children's surgery is critical, especially in the midst of conflict. I do want to give you a brief heads up that the video is first-hand footage from inside Gaza and does include some images of injured children.
Good morning. My name is Alessandro Mrejcik, and I'm the head of the United Nations Development Program office here in Gaza. The Gaza Strip today is one of the most destroyed places on earth. Situation is catastrophic, to say the least. Basic services have collapsed, and this includes education, health, water, and energy. Over 80%, 85% of the buildings are destroyed. and almost 2 million Palestinians are displaced and have no home where to return to. Many of these are children, and we know that during a crisis like what we are currently experiencing in Gaza, children are among the most vulnerable. Helping children to access safe surgery they deserve in countries where it may not be available is an important contributor to recovery and to sustainable development, definitely in the long term. Properly equipping local surgeons supports local workforces and boosts economic recovery and growth. Skills stay in the country, allowing continuous, reliable care for children. And it also ensures that care is provided equitably and reaches those that are most in need. And communities also no longer have to rely on expensive medical evacuation. We have seen the impact of proper health care on the ground in Gaza. And through our support to doctors, nurses, medical specialists, through an emergency employment program, building local capacities, local system creates a cycle where those who are supported can then support others, and this has been critical throughout the war. And healthy children continue to grow in healthy adults who can learn, work, and contribute to their communities. This gives community a boost already now during the ceasefire towards starting the early recovery, and then reconstruction. And all of this definitely in the long term towards the achievement of the SDGs. And it means that we move closer to a world where everyone has the opportunity to live a healthy and fulfilling and peaceful life.
What Alessandro describes in Gaza is a powerful reminder that when health systems break down, whether from war or political instability, it's unfortunately the children who suffer first and recover last. But conflict is only one of the forces placing health systems under strain. The next is one we all share a collective responsibility for, and that's climate. Climate disasters, floods, hurricanes, earthquakes, and heat waves cause direct injuries and overwhelm fragile health systems. In Malawi, Cyclone Freddy caused catastrophic flooding and landslides, destroying roads and hospitals and stranding families with children who had fractures and burns, unable to reach care. The photo on the left is one I took in Chad teaching a trauma surgery course last year. Each year, seasonal flooding washes away the same fragile infrastructure, spreads disease, and deepens existing inequalities. For many communities, the crises caused by climate disasters are not single events. They're a cycle of loss and recovery that never truly ends. The Kakuma refugee camp in northern Kenya, home to more than 200,000 refugees, shows what happens when the effects of war and climate collide. With 61% of their population under the age of 18, the pressures on the young population are profound. Families fleeing conflict from South Sudan arrive already traumatized, only to face drought, extreme heat, and scarce natural resources in a harsh desert that surrounds the camp. Daily life becomes a constant struggle and a vivid reminder of how violence and environmental stress continue to deepen the vulnerabilities and shape every aspect of their daily survival. Power instability adds another layer of fragility for communities already under strain. Around the world, outages interrupt daily life, but in low-resource settings, they interrupt care itself. Aging grids, extreme weather, and limited maintenance leave many regions vulnerable, and the WHO estimates that nearly 1 billion people worldwide receive care in facilities with absent or unreliable electricity. That's 15% of the world's population unable to go to a health facility that has electricity. In these environments, blackouts do not just turn the lights off like they do in our homes. They cause damaging power spikes, they shut down essential equipment, and force surgeons to pause or abandon procedures or use makeshift contraptions to suspend flashlights above the operating table, as was done here. Rising fuel costs also mean that backup generators are difficult to maintain and unreliable when needed most. We actually monitored outages at partner hospitals across 4 countries in Africa over a 3-year period. Each site experienced between 35 and 107 outages in a 3-month period. The average outage lasted 103 minutes. These repeated disruptions happen every few days and pose real danger to patients whose lives depend on uninterrupted power. And it's not only in remote regions or in Africa that this happens. In countries widely regarded as modern and advanced like Brazil, our partner surgeons have told us how many blackouts they have in the middle of procedures, and the fact that they rely on headlamps that they purchase on Amazon themselves because the children before them can't wait until the power comes back on. This is the reality in many places where children need surgery. Power instability compounds the effects of conflict, climate pressure, and limited resources, creating yet another barrier to care. The crisis in Kakuma also reflects a wider pattern across low-resource settings. As conflict and climate strain health systems, trauma injuries and childhood cancers are rising sharply, conditions that require surgery yet remain among the least accessible forms of care for children worldwide. We often think of cancer as a problem of wealthy nations, but childhood cancers are rising fastest in low and middle-income countries. Tumors that are curable with surgery and treatment, trauma from road accidents, burns, and violence. Trauma is actually now the leading cause of young people worldwide, and over 90% of trauma deaths occur in low-resource settings. These aren't just medical tragedies. They undermine health, but they ripple into education because children can't attend school when they're disabled or sick. They impact work and economic growth because parents leave jobs to care for their children. And they impact poverty because a single untreated surgical condition can trap families in debt for generations. Safe surgery is therefore not only a health intervention, but a development intervention that can unlock futures. Numbers and global impact matter, but for me, it's about the patients, the children and their families. In Uganda, I met a mother who traveled many hours by bus to reach the only surgical facility in the country that could help her child. He was newly born with the intestines on the outside of his body. In the US, it's a condition where almost everyone survives, but by the time she arrived, it was too late. The hospital simply didn't have the equipment, the staff, or a system in place to save her child. And that experience stayed with me. It showed me in the most painful way what happens when there are no resources and no health system to save a child's life, even when you have a willing, dedicated, talented surgeon to do the work. The story of that young mother in Uganda is not just about global health. It's about what we value as communities, how we respond when children are in need, whether they're here at home or halfway across the world. Here, if a child needs surgery, a broken bone, appendicitis, or even a heart condition, parents know a hospital will be there. That safety net gives all of us peace of mind, and we probably rarely stop to think about what life would look like without it. Oops, sorry. But around the world, families love their children just as much as we do here. The difference is that if a child needs something as simple as a hernia repair or a broken bone set, the safe care usually isn't available, and that can mean a lifetime of disability or death. So that's what drives us at Kids Operating Room, the belief that every child, no matter where they were born, whether it's in this Kenyan refugee camp or here in New Canaan, Connecticut, deserves a chance at life and health. Compassion is not a finite resource. It's a muscle that we strengthen. When we care for children everywhere, we teach our own children empathy, equity, and shared humanity, the same values that drives us to improve our communities here at home. But wanting the best for children is only the first step. Delivering it requires the right tools, and this is where many well-meaning efforts have failed. While donated equipment often comes from a place of great intentions, the reality is that much of it arrives outdated, out of warranty, and impossible to service. Many hospitals, in fact most, don't have trained biomedical engineers, and even when they do, replacement parts are hard to source. The result is equipment graveyards like this one that are scattered across continents. We work with global partners to identify areas of high need and where the resources are low. Even when patients can reach a healthcare facility, the buildings are often outdated or unsafe with limited equipment, unreliable electricity, and no space to deliver even the most basic surgical care. These conditions create devastating ripple effects for families and are exactly the challenges the Sustainable Development Goals were created to address. These photos are from Gorongosa, Mozambique. On the left is the mother's house. Women with high-risk pregnancies stay here because it's unsafe for them to return home. Yet there is no monitoring equipment and no way to stabilize a woman in crisis. Some will require urgent C-sections, and although there is a surgeon capable of performing C-sections here, they cannot be done because there's no OR. The nearest hospital is hours away, and every minute of delay puts those mothers' lives at risk, along with the babies. The right is the only space they have that serves as their emergency procedure room. This is still the reality as we sit here tonight. And this is what overlooked surgery truly looks like. Not a lack of skill, not a lack of will, a lack of safe spaces and the basic tools that make care possible. We at Kids Operating Room are dedicated to changing that and solving this gap in global health with a clear and cost-effective solution. KidsOR transforms the type of structure I just showed you in Mozambique, or here, into fully safe pediatric and maternal surgical ecosystems that save lives immediately. A fully equipped solar-powered operating room with pre- and post-operative wards costs only $400,000 and will treat thousands of patients each year and last decades. Everything can be implemented and operational within 6 months of being funded. It's one of the most cost-effective and immediate ways to reduce maternal and child deaths. It directly advances the Sustainable Development Goals by strengthening essential health systems, reducing preventable mortality, empowering women, and supporting community resilience. This is an operating room from Zambia. On the left, you see the outdated, under-equipped operating room. And on the right, the transformation. It's not just colorful artwork, but entirely new infrastructure, a modern operating room table, surgical lights that work, an anesthetic machine, and essential monitoring equipment. And basic structural renovations like repairing the floors and walls also strengthen infection control and reduce post-operative infections and mortality, ensuring safer outcomes for every child. And just to note, our designs are intentional. We recognize that children are often awake when entering the operating room, so we create spaces that shift their attention away from the scary, intimidating machines to the colorful animals on the wall to create a reassuring, vibrant surrounding. 8 years ago, when I started working with KidsOR, we started with a single pediatric operating room in Uganda. Today, we've grown to 114 across 38 countries, including some of the most challenging places in the world, such as Haiti, Congo, Somalia, Sudan, Afghanistan, Ukraine, and the Kakuma refugee camp. Supporting our work in conflict zones like here in Ukraine connects directly to the goal of peace, justice, and strong institutions. Safe, functioning hospitals are a marker of peace and resilience. Without them, societies cannot recover, cannot educate children, and cannot grow economically. War is not just geopolitical. As you heard Alessandro say, it's a pediatric health emergency. In October, we completed our largest project we've ever done to date of 6 operating rooms in the western Ukrainian city of Lviv, turning these spaces from crumbling, unused, unsafe piles of rubble into 6 state-of-the-art solar-powered pediatric operating rooms. They can treat now over 12,000 children per year in these ORs. It was my great honor to lead on this project and witness the resilience and dedication of the teams there and the incredible impact this will have on the children and their families. Speaking of children, I want to introduce you to 2 young boys whose lives I think show what the SDGs truly represent. They remind us that health, equity, and opportunity become real only when families can access care that their children need. Jabril and Doc are both refugees whose childhoods were stolen from them and shaped by conditions that should never have defined their futures. Jabril was born with a painful hernia that made eating difficult and delayed his ability to walk. He spent so much time in the hospital that he fell really far behind in school. He watched his friends play while he couldn't, and his mother carried the constant worry of caring for a child who never felt well. In the United States, Jibreel's condition is treated quickly. Surgery is routine, recovery takes days. But for Jibreel, there were no pediatric surgical facilities, so instead of days, he waited years. Preventable pain shaped his childhood simply because care was out of reach. When his family fled to the Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya, he still had no access to surgery. That all changed with the first ever installation of a pediatric operating room in a refugee camp when we did the installation in 2021. Jibreel finally received the surgery that he needed, his pain ended, and he returned to school. He now gets to play with his friends and help his mother at home with pride. In a way, his life and his mother's life opened back up together. Doc's story carries the same truth. He was born in South Sudan with both feet turned inward, a condition called bilateral clubfoot. For years, he had to be carried everywhere he went by his family since he was completely unable to walk. In the US, the condition is identified at birth. It's treated within weeks with simple casting and a small outpatient procedure. Children are usually walking by their first birthday. The entire treatment really usually takes only a few weeks. But for Doc, his steps were delayed not only because he was unable to walk, but because the treatment was out of reach. So he waited 4 years to have surgery to allow him to walk. 1 month after his procedure, he walked for the first time, and today he plays soccer with his friends and actually dreams of becoming a doctor someday so that he can give others the same chance he was given. These stories are the Sustainable Development Goals in action. They show what becomes possible when we commit to health equity, because if we ensure that no child and no family is denied care simply because of where they were born, the possibilities for them are endless. Nearly 1 billion people worldwide, as I said, rely on health facilities with no or unstable power. And as we can all imagine, surgery without power, even for a brief moment, could be catastrophic. So we invest in solar power for our operating rooms to ensure that not only reliable care can be achieved, but reduce the carbon footprint and cost to hospitals. This advances the goals on climate action, clean energy, and even gender equity, because when safe surgery is unavailable, it's usually the moms who bear the burden of seeking care, often traveling for many days with their children. Infrastructure, though, is not enough. And this is how we make 100% of our operating rooms still functional after 8 years. It's the people, the local teams. In some countries where we work, there are 0 or just 1 pediatric surgeon for the entire nation. 1 surgeon for 40 million children. That's why investing in people is just as critical as investing in infrastructure. We don't do mission-based work. We don't send teams. We want to build sustainable, resilient health systems that will long outlast us. Ones that aren't short-term and that aren't going to fall apart just because a conflict or disaster occurs. Our sites in Haiti are the perfect example of this. When violence erupted in Port-au-Prince last year, almost every single aid organization fled the country. Staffed by local teams, our 2 operating rooms in Port-au-Prince were 2 of the only ORs still functioning in the city because they weren't reliant upon outside teams. Even 2 weeks ago, using local teams, we were able to install our solar surgery system during this conflict. We award scholarships to surgeons, anesthesiologists, nurses, and provide opportunities to biomedical engineers and solar engineers, including the first pediatric surgeons in countries like Burundi and South Sudan that have no pediatric surgeon for their entire population. But this is because we know that that's how you create a sustainable health system. We're committed to building the teams that are going to last for decades to come. And we're committed to innovating. Having addressed the critical need of power through our solar surgery system, we're now turning our attention to the global crisis of reliable oxygen for patients undergoing surgery. We've been working with NASA and American Oxygen to field test NASA technology that was created for the space shuttle, or the ultimate low resource setting, to create medical grade oxygen and low resource settings. And we're testing it right now in our global hub in Scotland and at a children's hospital in Zambia. We think this could be the next big breakthrough. This is a site in Malawi. A functioning operating room, believe it or not, but one where most of the equipment is outdated and barely usable. Before KidsOR support, almost 80% of our partner sites worldwide were missing basic equipment, working tables, reliable lights, appropriate breathing tubes, and instruments small enough for children. This is the same site afterwards. With the proper tools in place, we've now created the capacity for over 200,000 children per year to receive safe, quality care. That translates into almost 10 million years of disability averted and over $18 billion of economic benefit. When the right equipment is provided, everything changes. The number of children who can be treated increases. Younger children can finally receive the care they need, and surgical complications such as infections and even mortality decrease. It also means children can return to school, mothers can return to work, and families can thrive. Ripple effects that can be felt for generations. So when we step back, the picture is clear. The lack of safe surgical care is not just a health crisis. It's a crisis of education, of equality, of opportunity, and of peace. But it doesn't have to be this way. Progress is built on partnerships. No single person or organization can solve this alone, but together with the right will and the right tools, we can give children everywhere the chance at a healthy life that they deserve. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals remind us all that service above self and the belief that local action fuels global progress is at the heart of true leadership. Supporting surgery for children abroad does not mean turning away from the challenges we face at home. It's simply extending that same spirit of community care to the wider world. Because when we help build stronger health systems and brighter futures for children everywhere, we're ultimately creating a healthier, safer, and more peaceful world for all of us. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Maija. If you have a question, please raise your hand. I'll bring the mic to you because we're recording and we'd like to capture your questions.
What's your percentage of expenses towards raising money and running the business, basically?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. There are some out there I won't name that are like 50-50. Ours is somewhere between 85 and 87 cents on the dollar that goes directly towards the projects. We also are lucky that we have some donors who specifically fund some administrative costs or salaries. So, for example, when we did our Ukraine project, 100% of donations went directly towards that project.
Thank you very much for that great presentation. I mean, it's really powerful. This town's super generous. We do a lot of, community work, but it's great to get a global organization to come in front of us because it's powerful. I'm wondering along the same lines of money being a bottleneck, but there've got to be other, needs to be implemented as quickly as possible to help people. What are the bottlenecks? Is it constructing the buildings? Is it the doctors? What do you need to keep scaling this, because it's very powerful?
No, absolutely. So I think the biggest thing, it all boils down to funding. We have a team that's not at capacity that could do more. We have done about one operating room every 27 days. We could do more than that. It doesn't take that long. We work really closely with the ministries of health. I have a long Excel file that has a ton of already vetted sites in almost every single country around the world. But the other piece that you briefly mentioned is, in order to really make it sustainable, there needs to be an investment in the human resources. For us, it's always been easier to raise funds for infrastructure than for scholarships. But ultimately, I don't want a world where there are empty operating rooms sitting unused and children still aren't being taken care for, but we happen to have a logo up on the wall to make someone feel better. So it's really about a balance between investing in the people and investing in the infrastructure. And one of the reasons that we have such a list that exists in terms of where we want to go is because of the collaborations we've done, especially with ministries of health. So we're very careful about where we work. We pick good partners, people who have been on the ground for years. And I think that's another reason that we've had so much success in the long-term sustainability of all of our projects. But I would encourage everyone to think both about the people and the infrastructure.
Thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. Would you please comment on supply chain, so for medical supplies and replacement parts?
Yeah, so one of the reasons that we don't take donations, except if they're like a large-scale donation, for example, from the NHS in Scotland, who built a bunch of what they call Florence Nightingale hospitals during the pandemic, is because we need to have, we have a mock operating room at our headquarters in Scotland, where we can 24/7 help the biomedical engineers replace or service. So we have the same thing in every single OR as much as possible, so that it enables us to buy in bulk when it comes to supply chains, get a discount, which is great for charities trying to do impactful work, and then ensure that we have people who are trained on all of that biomedical engineering piece. So if you have 18 different ventilators, that's a lot more work for someone than 2 different types. So in terms of supply chain, we do everything through our headquarters. We don't purchase individual pieces in different countries. It also helps avoid real issues of compliance and bribery and things like that. So we're very, very cautious about what we do, and that's why we run everything through our headquarters and we distribute the actual equipment. We haven't had major issues with supply chains except for the shipping time. And that's usually where it starts to get a bit tricky. But we're very lucky that now we've worked in so many countries, we have pretty good context to help overcome that as well.
Hi, thank you. Great presentation. I'm just thinking through on the supply chain side, have you thought about standardizing like an operating room in a box, like out of a container, where it's completely prefabricated with standard modern equipment, plug and play, ready to plug into like a generator or even a solar panel, but that could be even picked up and moved to a place of, let's say, conflict. And then you can kind of get some economies of scale, get companies like Stryker and GE to kind of back that. And it seems like that might be able to drive some efficiencies on the non-human side of the equation. I don't know if that's been thought through at all.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I'm smiling because we've been working on really exactly that. So we went through a phase that came out of the collaboration we've been trying to achieve in Gaza, which initially started with the idea of tents. Tented hospitals have a lot of problems. Although they can be erected quickly, they're terrible to work in if you talk to any healthcare provider. They're really power heavy because they have to be air conditioned and heated, and they require power to even keep them inflated. And they get damaged really quickly. And they don't last pretty much more than like a year or 2. So then we started thinking about containers. There's a couple companies that do a great job with that, and we even explored it for a while. What we've come to, and I didn't talk about it tonight, but along the lines of innovation. So we've now developed, and we're about to deploy it in South Sudan. It's what we have planned for Gaza, and in the Gambia. And that is what we call a rapidly deployable modular system. So they look like containers. Each clinical unit is the size of a container. But when you think about a container, a truck will fit 1. A flat pack rapidly deployable unit will fit 8 of those on 1 truck bed. So, and they can actually be put up in a matter of hours. So we've now built a pilot site at our global hub in Scotland that was put up in about 8 hours, and it's an operating room, a recovery room, and a sterile area. Where the plan for South Sudan can be put up in about 3 days. That's 2 operating rooms, all of the support system, and they're going to last for approximately 15 to 20 years. The one we designed for Gaza is about 150 units. It's a 55-bed maternal and child hospital, and we think it can be put up in a week. And we've been exploring solar power for them, wind. They're fully insulated. They're really power efficient. So it's definitely the next realm of what we're doing, especially in areas like South Sudan or this hospital in the Gambia where they didn't have the space. But we can do exactly what you said. It's our surgical system, our surgical unit. We've designed a maternal unit for delivery and C-sections. And so maybe next time I come back, I'll be able to show you that. But we already have the pilot site, and hopefully that's what the plan is for Gaza, if we can achieve that funding.
I was wondering how well you coordinate your work with other organizations that are doing the same thing. For example, about 30 years ago, so it's a long time. I was in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa, and the World Bank had some medical people working on the river, down the river, and WHO had some people working on the other side of the river, and neither one knew what the other was doing.
Yeah, big problem. Everyone's working in silos, and everyone just wants their own kudos. So we have really tried to break that mold. We work really closely with local partners, NGOs. One of our biggest partners has been Smile Train, who's one of the large cleft lip, cleft palate organizations in the country. We've built about 30 operating rooms for Smile Train in the places that they've worked. We've worked with Operation Smile, with Johnson & Johnson. We work with the Ministries of Health, and that helps get us the connections to the other NGOs and nonprofits working on the ground, because the locals always know who else is doing stuff. Just because we don't know doesn't mean there isn't someone who does. And so we really try to be collaborative. We don't want to be competitive. That's not how we're going to achieve these goals. So we're always looking for additional partners, and especially ones that can help, in an area where maybe we can pool resources so that we can amplify what we're each doing.
So I'll all the way in the back.
Hi.
I'll jump on to that question. So my question was, I was especially intrigued by your gender equality and kind of the little bit of analysis you had on maternal health. And so in light, I was wondering about particular organizations that might be new or less known, and there is one that has New Canaan ties. There's a powerhouse mom who doesn't live here anymore, but Brenda Batista and Krista Turlington, who have this Every Mother Counts. And so I'm on that partnership. Are you open to new partnerships? Do you find that becomes problematic because it's two different policies? It's kind of a similar question. But
No, we're always open to new partnerships and just a conversation. Sometimes it's like dating and it's not going to work out. Other times it might end up being a marriage that lasts for 50 years. I think one of the really important things that people forget about maternal health. In this room, when we think about women giving birth, when we think about moms, we think about adults. But if we stop for a minute and we think about what's actually happening in a lot of the world, it's teenagers who are giving birth. In Uganda, it's 7 children per woman. It's teenagers who are having the C-sections, who are having the babies, who are not getting prenatal care. So they're receiving care in our pediatric operating rooms because they're kids. And 35% of the maternal deaths worldwide are in teenagers. So there's so much overlap that I feel like gets ignored because in some construct somewhere in some room, someone decided that pediatric surgery and maternal health had no overlap whatsoever. But it's really an area that we love to collaborate and explore on because it's so integral to the work that's happening on the ground in our ORs. That picture I showed you from Mozambique, that whole project is centered around maternal health care because they don't have a pediatric surgeon, but they have an OBGYN and they have a general surgeon. And again, the population of women, females needing care is incredibly young.
Okay, before we go to our last question, I just want to let you all know that there's a resource table here, and you're welcome to stay after and ask Dr. Cheung any questions or any of the folks from KidsOR any questions. Okay.
You mentioned training. How is it done? Who does it? Is it done locally?
Great question. So it's a combination. We work very closely. In the U.S., the board for the surgeons is called the American College of Surgeons. They do our credentialing, they oversee continuing education. There are similar colleges throughout the world. We work very closely with the Western African College of Surgeons, with the College of Surgeons in East and Southern and Central Africa, with the colleges in every region. So we help by supporting them with funding for scholarships, but we don't pick the scholars because that would have a little too much conflict of interest. We want the local teams to select their best, their brightest, the people they want who are going to return to their communities. So that's how the scholarships work, is through the larger institutions in those countries. We do some training for where we bring in teams to train. I myself have taught advanced laparoscopy, minimally invasive surgery, trauma surgery courses, but they've been in a train the trainer model. So what we want is for local champions to join the courses, learn, become experts themselves, be able to then teach that course. And we've done that really successfully, especially in places like Uganda, where it's been scaled up countrywide. And then some of our trainings, last year, I was really thrilled to start nursing training as a part of our programs. And that's all done by local nurses, regional nurses. And because they know the challenges that they're up against. They know the medications, they know the pathologies, they know that we don't have CT scan here in rural Mozambique. And so they can teach their teammates how to appropriately respond. So we do a variety of them, but as much as we can, we try to enable South-South collaborations and local train-the-trainer type modules, again, to be sustainable.
We are so grateful to the United Nations, to KidsOR, and to you, Maija, for the incredible work that you and your team are doing. Thank you so much for being here tonight, and thank you all for coming out on this rainy night. Thank you so much. Good night, everyone.